This is going to be a little bit longer open than normal, but I think we have to do it when we're dealing with the moms of two players.
That's right.
We're showing right now that we all know and love, Mr. Bainter and Mr. Lipsky. Okay, so for folks that don't know, there was a video from Springfield Athletics this week, where Nick Bainter and his roommate Jeremy Lipsky sort of told their story. It's kind of a love story of sorts, bro love story.
Definitely.
So we thought we would open this week's show with a little discussion with their mothers, because I mean we can't do it without moms.
Right.
This is Mrs. Bainter.
Yes.
And what's your first name?
Trisha.
And this is Mrs. Lipsky.
Danielle.
Danielle, you might remember last year photobombing our video on opening night.
That was me.
She's Nick's other mom.
So, ladies, let's start with Mrs. Bainter. A lot of people have written in and told us what a character your son is. Where does he get this from?
I have no idea. He's been that way ever since he was a little boy. He's been just like that. He's, the life of the party. He's very funny, always trying to make everybody laugh, and yeah.
Was there really a point he was a little boy? Because
he was a little boy. He was this little, scrawny little boy.
What did you feed him?
He ate a lot, actually, but
I'm sure he did.
He's not so scrawny now.
Yeah, Mrs. Lipsky, your son is definitely the taller, maybe more handsome one of the two. Some women would say.
I don't know.
You might argue that one over here. When he first met Nick, what did he tell you about him?
Oh my God, it was literally a match made in heaven. That's how I would describe it. I mean, exactly what they said on the video is exactly how it happened. The two of them just connected like unbelievably. We always talk about it, how the stars aligned for those two, and we hit the roommate jackpot by we and parents as well.
Yeah,
this has been a great journey,
very close.
all of us, families.
Yeah.
It's been unbelievable.
Now
but we do want to set the record straight.
Go ahead.
Because I'm sorry, we have yet to see either one of them really do their own friggin' laundry. Sorry. I don't know
Wait, time out. You're saying that you both do their laundry?
Not now, but not so much
most
now.
Of freshman and sophomore year, definitely. A little bit different. Maybe by junior year they started doing some on their own, and Jeremy's girlfriend definitely helps out with the laundry. But
okay,
you have to see Nick and Jeremy actually do their own laundry, or clean for that matter.
We're gonna.
But I will say Nick does not do laundry or clean.
Okay, we're gonna talk to Brian McGoffin about truth in advertising on the Springfield website, because obviously that's not true now. We got that. Have you ever gotten a call from Coach Cerasuolo, maybe concerned about the guys and what they're up to at any point in time?
No, I've never gotten a call.
No.
Have you?
Nope.
No.
Nope. They're like the golden boys, those two. They did try to separate them briefly during preseason, junior year. That did not go over well.
Were there tears?
Yes.
There were a lot of commotion, a lot of tears. The other coaches were kind of shaking their head, and Coach C said, "Just do whatever the heck you want."
Yeah. They couldn't separate them.
Yeah.
I remember
it was impossible.
Yeah. I was going to say, I remember when Nick first found out Jeremy was his roommate. He was like, I remember him coming to me and going, "Mom, he's like a man. He's not even a kid. I don't understand this. He's a man."
Now, I've got one question, though. Why is Nick not photobombing this video exactly?
Because he's probably ready to kill both of us, actually.
He's not happy that I'm doing this.
Yeah, my son's probably
He didn't want me to do this.
Well, so, we normally give the player guests shout-outs at the end of the interviews, as you probably have seen us do.
Yeah.
It's time for the moms to give some shout-outs.
Yeah.
So, Mrs. Bainter, go ahead. Your shout-outs.
Well, shout out to my son. I love him.
Hi, Nick.
I'm so proud of
moms.
Nick. I'm very proud of Nick. Everything he does makes me so proud. But I would shout out to our other moms, Dana, Amy,
All of the
and the dads. The dads are great, supportive. Danielle?
I'm going to give a shout out to my entire family, who is so
Yes,
supportive. We had quite a few here today, and they continue to support Jeremy unbelievably during his journey. And shout out to my son, number 72. I'm so proud of you, and this has been a fantastic journey, and grateful every day that he's here at Springfield.
Can I ask you to give one special shout-out to my co-host James Baker, who will love this video?
Yes.
What do you think he's?
You guys are great.
Do you think he's more handsome than me, though?
I don't know about that.
We'd have to see him in person.
We'll talk about this offline.
We see you in person now.
Well, hey.
But you guys are great. You do a great job. Thank you so much.
Ladies,
so
thank you
much.
very much. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you
Thank you
and
so
your
much.
sons.
Yes.
Come on, Jerry.
I gotta go.
Yeah. Mine's long way away.
Give your mom a hug.
Oh, you're lucky.
Nick, wherever you are.
Oh yeah, he
Love
ran
you.
inside.
Yeah, he's over there.
I love you too.
Love you too, bud. That's awesome.
That was probably one of the all-time best interviews in the history of In the Huddle, Frank.
Nick didn't seem
Hall
to
of
agree,
Fame.
though. Nick would not come around. I don't know what was going on there. He's a little bit upset. Maybe he either wanted the spotlight or was afraid his mom was going to throw him under the bus about something. She didn't either. She was awesome.
About laundry, there was a little stuff going on about laundry, which I can relate to because in a house with 5 teenagers, guess who's doing all the laundry? This guy.
Well, one thing I do have to remind myself, while the hug was a nice effect by Lipsky, I need to make sure that I don't put my head first into a shoulder pad again, because that's grounds for concussion later on. That didn't feel great, but we rolled with it. And nonetheless, that's just the start of week 7 of In the Huddle. Okay, so let's get back to earth here a little bit. We will have interviews from that game coming up. You'll want to see that around the second half of this show, but we have to tell you about what happened in the week in the first place. I mean, that's what we do here in this host chat show.
That's what we do.
Yeah, or at least that's what we try to do, I guess. JB, again, as the bottom line says here today, not many close games as conferences separate. Even looking for clips this week, we went to a lot of first touchdowns just to show the momentum start, because a lot of teams grabbed that lead and didn't look back. But there were some good games along the way. That Cortland-Alfred game, if it wasn't for the special teams, that wouldn't have been a really 10-point game for Cortland. It probably would have been a game possibly for Alfred. So, you know what?
Yeah.
We talked about the 3 aspects of the game of football: special teams.
Indeed. Yeah. This weekend was interesting, Frank. It sort of was it's kind of an oddball in that there was only 8 games kicking off at noon. And then there was like this huge block at 2:00, one of which that you attended in person out at Kings Point. Sort of a later start, and some kind of wacky things happened. I think there were about 5 or 6 shutouts. Like you said, some lopsided scores. In the prior show, I mentioned that this was kind of a semifinal round, and it was pretty clear who came out the winners on those semifinals. So in week 9, we have, I think, about 4 or 5 big matchups starting to shape up. This weekend, we have a big matchup starting to shape up in the MASCAC, which we'll get to a little later on in the show. But yeah, separation Saturday definitely happened in week 7.
Let's tell everybody about it. We do that with these 34 games, 60 of which we have video clips for coming up in crunch time for week 7. Unusually, we're going to start in New York this go-around. We'll start in the Empire 8. We were just talking about that Cortland-Alfred game, 31-21 in favor of Cortland. But early on, let's talk about Colt Burgess. First, the 84-yard kickoff return to make it a 7-7 game. And then early in the second quarter, I believe it was, Burgess blocks this kick, and I believe Dylan Strader was the person that returns it for a TD to make it 14-7. And honestly, Cortland didn't look back in that game. They win 31-21. Alfred outgained Cortland 416-221. That's the irony. Again, it was the special teams that really did it. We'll have an interview with Brett Segala coming up later on in the week. But you watch this game a little bit closely, and Cortland, the 3 facets of the game, like we were saying coming into this.
Yeah, and this is sort of tipping the hand a little bit, but in our conversation with Brett, he did mention that Alfred's game plan, and they did execute it pretty well. I mean, they had Griffin rush for over 200 yards. They held the ball for over 36 minutes. They tried to keep that Cortland explosive offense on the sideline, and they did for most of the game. But the Dragons, you got to give them credit. In a must-win situation, they made enough plays, both on offense, defense, and special teams, to get the win. And they remain in the driver's seat with a kind of on a collision course with Brockport in a couple weeks.
We in that interview also discussed Morrisville State, who shocks Utica 54-51 in double overtime. You're seeing the touchdown by Kinsey Williams. That was the walk-off touchdown in double overtime by Morrisville State. Congratulations to them. And St. John Fisher 49, Hartwick 21. St. John Fisher's offense with 572 total yards and basically 21 unanswered points scored twice in that game. They were.
I thought Hartwick played Rockport this weekend. Was that? I'm just teasing.
Oh wow! Yeah, Keith. It happens, buddy. It happens. Yeah, go over listen to Run Nation if you want to hear what we're talking about.
Lots of games sometimes.
Yeah, Liberty League. Let's go to that next. Union and St. Lawrence were tied at 17 at halftime. Yeah. It took this play.
Bellamy looking to the far side with Ross Jr. who runs under it and has the ball. The referee, touchdown! Andre Ross Jr.
9:50 or thereabouts left in the third quarter. The go-ahead touchdown, Andre Ross Jr. from Will Bellamy from 15 yards out. That made it 38-17. That made it 24-17. Eventually, it was 38-17, is what he said. But Ike Arabor, I should know this by now. 25 rushes, 178 yards, and 1 touchdown. I want to say, though, Tyler Groshot had over 300 yards passing at halftime for St. Lawrence, but he was shut down in the second half, obviously, to make it 38-17. Buffalo State still in the discussion here in the Liberty League a little bit because we're still early on. Zach Chesky to Jordan Everett, 51-yard pass made it 13-0 just before halftime. They win and beat Rochester 13-7. And then let's also talk about Ithaca, number 9 team of the nation, playing like it at home against Hobart, 34-0, as Hobart was held to 201 total yards, and they had 4 sacks in Ithaca's defense, a forced fumble, first shutout for Hobart since when? 2000.
Yeah, almost 20 years ago. Actually, to Rochester, it was a 14-0 game way back when. So I think the only regular season loss they had that year. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things, scoreless first quarter. Defenses were sort of flexing their muscles. There was a controversial targeting call that ejected junior outside linebacker Emmett Ford. Having watched the replays along with yourself and one of our ref friends of the program, it was the right call ultimately, but it certainly seemed to affect Hobart's defensive play calling for the rest of the game. And at the end of the day, you have to credit the statesman assassin Joe Germanario. He has Hobart's number, has beaten him 3 years in a row, and he made some plays at the line of scrimmage that really helped Ithaca score on a couple of key plays. And Hobart honestly kind of lost their composure at the end, and it's going to be a tough week of watching film and practice. But the Statesmen still have a lot to play for. We heard from Tracy King from the Liberty League that the New York State Bowl is still around, so it's possible Hobart could be playing for a spot in that, either against a Cortland or maybe in Alfred, which would be a great matchup. But they still have 3 more games, chance maybe to go 8-2. Not the outcome they wanted, but you got to give Ithaca credit. They called and played a great game, and 34-0 kind of speaks for itself.
NJAC time. TCNJ is still in the conversation as well in the NJAC, and their defense is really showing up. Their offense might need to do something here because it was all special teams scores in this game. Kane with the field goal, but TCNJ had a punt block return for a touchdown.
Tap blocked 1 kick so far. They bring the house again, and they block it, and it's picked up for a TCNJ score. Second blocked punt of the afternoon.
Joe Chiampola is the man who scores the touchdown that you're seeing. 7-3 TCNJ. Kane outgained TCNJ 300 to 158 yards. Overall, just the offense combined was not much to talk about in that game, but still, TCNJ moves to 2-1 in the conference after that, and Kane as well, 2-1 in the conference. Salisbury, number 12 team in the nation, 38. Rowan 7 really failed to kick, did Rowan in that game. It was pretty much Salisbury early and often. Jack Lanham with 238 total yards. rushing and 2 passing touchdowns. So much for that triple option mentality in Salisbury, which we know isn't really a true triple option after talking to Sherman Wood.
Yeah, and I'm calling it here, Frank. I mean, Salisbury are your 2019 NJAC champs. The rest of their schedule is, they're gonna have some challenges for sure. But I feel like a 9-0 Salisbury team is they've got it locked in.
Let's save that for later because we'll look at the standings and see what you mean by that. Number 15, Wesley over William Patterson, 45-7. They outgained William Patterson 543 to 230 as John Mullen went 23 for 32, 365, and 3 touchdowns in that game. Montclair 24, Christopher Newport 0 as the defense of Montclair held CNU to 135 total yards and just 5 first downs. Up next, the MAC. And let's start with Del Valle at Wilkes. It was not much of a game, 42-0. But let's look at Tamir Barksdale's 64-yard punt return to make it 14-0 halfway through the first quarter. That play probably is what really started things rolling the wrong way for Wilkes in this game. 42-0. Coach Strock on social media afterwards said this is where we kind of have to pick up and just learn from what happened here, essentially paraphrasing him there. But Wilkes was outgained 383-100 in this game. Delaware Valley with 5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and an interception. I should also
quick stat in here for Del Valle. With a win, if they win this Saturday, they will have broken the MAC record for consecutive conference wins. I think it's 26 in a row. So, we weren't really sure what to make of the Aggies this offseason. They graduated a ton on defense and a lot on offense too. So it's almost a completely new team. But you got to really credit them. Their coaching staff, and it's like they haven't missed a beat. So here we go.
I always call Brady Williams a magician. This game was not a magician's work in terms of late scoring, but you're going to see a touchdown here where he looked like he was surely sacked, but tosses it 50 yards, Isaiah Williams, for the touchdown. Ultimately, it's a 40-14 win by Misericordia. And, Anthony Caserta is still putting up some great passing yards here after you floor him, by the way. 366, 2 touchdowns, interception. The running back, Michael Gawlik, with 275 yards rushing for Misericordia. So you put that Brady Williams' special arm and winning abilities, and boy, be careful out there, Mac, because suddenly Misericordia is making statements now on top of those close games. This will be interesting to watch play out. Lebanon Valley, 41. Widener, 35. Lev Val trail 28-14 at the half, but Widener again gives up one they probably should have had, and it's been that kind of up and down season for the Pride. Stevenson, 55. Albright, 7. Tie game at the half at 7-7. 48 unanswered points in the second half by Stevenson. That's what does in Albright once again. And Alvernia hung with Kings for a while in the game between those teams. 35-28 Kings wins as the Monarchs led 35-14 early in the fourth quarter. But hey, Alvernia tried, and give that team credit for not dying in that game. We'll give credit to Jordan Downs, 29 rushes, 132 yards, and a touchdown for Kings. ECFC time. We'll go back now to New England. And let's talk about Dean versus Anna Maria. Terrell Watts throwing to Errol Bremy, I believe is the player's name. It's 28 yards for the touchdown, and it started the second half for Dean to go up 27-7. That pretty much was lights out at that point. Eventually a 41-20 win. Watts efficient, 20 for 27, 252, 4 passing and 1 rushing touchdown. And the interception and forced fumble, sack, 8 tackles for loss for the Dean defense. That was an all-around effort by the Dean Bulldogs. A little surprised by this one?
Yeah, a little bit. I thought the AmCats might be a little more game with the homecoming crowd and the momentum from the win over Alfred State. But yeah, I mean Terrell Watts with a really impressive performance, and the Bulldogs are they look like the team to beat in the ECFC. But there is a team down in DC that will have a word to say about that because they also put up a ton of offense last Saturday.
Let's look at the Gallaudet Bison at 62, Alfred State 41, 623 total yards. I can't even talk about it. I'm so excited about this number by Gallaudet.
623.
Yeah, and R.J. Randall, 14 rushes, 249 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Timo Benton, 15 rushes, 154 yards, and 5 touchdowns. You're seeing the Benton score in the play on the video that you're seeing right now if you're watching us. And SUNY Maritime, 21, Castleton 3, as the time of possession went definitely into SUNY Maritime's column, 36-24 basically. And his Hezekiah Williamson, 22 rushes, 118 yards, 1 touchdown. The ECFC, aside from Gallaudet, is a mess right now, and Dean doesn't qualify. So Gallaudet has a lead, but there's a lot to be said still with the 3 league games to go for these teams. In the CCC, this was a great game, and it should have been. We knew coming in it would be a good game. Western New England 38, Salve Regina 31. Alec Coleman, we're showing him with the 3-yard touchdown run that made it 38-24. Moriello, though, did respond, and there was still a chance for Salve Regina in this game until Ricky Montalvo intercepts to seal the game with 1:32 left. You're seeing that as well. The teams combined for over 1,000 yards. Coleman, 330 total yards, 3 passing, and 1 rushing touchdown in this game. They are still undefeated against Division III, don't forget, is Western New England. Hudson, though, wow. We were talking about University of New England looking for a signature win. Here it is. They beat Hudson on the road to 31-21. Brian Peters finding Kobe Johnson for the 66-yard touchdown pass, made it 17-14, and they really never looked back in the game after that. 31-21 final. They did trail 14-10 at the half before that touchdown we just talked about. Endicott pouring it on as well, 61-34 over Curry. Endicott led 35-14 at the half. Joe Koloski, 4 touchdowns, 319 passing yards. No more in the huddle jinx, I guess. He did have the week off, so I guess he rested up just in case we were that jinx. And Nichols, 40. Becker, 17, as Nichols scores 21 unanswered points in the second half. Michael Pina, 268 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, led the way for Nichols. Let's up next go to the MASCAC. And we'll have a Framingham State guest coming on this week, but we'll tell you more about that later as Framingham State beats Plymouth State 34-0. You're seeing Adam Wojcinski pass Emmanuel Exelholm, for 17 yards and a touchdown to make it 7-0. We were just showing you the first touchdown because that's where the momentum started and never let up, folks. They outgained Plymouth State 470-53. I'm just shocked by the lopsidedness of this game. Plymouth State is better than this.
Yeah, and they beat the Rams the last 2 years running. So we knew the Rams, had this game circled on their calendar. But boy, I mean, the defense really dominated and kept a Plymouth State team, which players like David Hamilton, other guys that normally rack up a lot of yards and points, just I don't know, they just couldn't get it going. But credit the Rams, they continue to control their destiny in the MASCAC.
Credit Joshua Anajogo, who will be joining us at the defensive end. He's a junior. He's got a year left for Framingham State with 6 tackles and 3 sacks in the game. He will be in our player. We'll have 2 player interviews this week, again, layered into one episode later in the week. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk about WestCon as well, though. We've talked about putting up points, 62-28 over Westfield State. Let's see David James finding Chris Pascal.
James in the pocket, throws long, throws deep. Pascal! Touchdown! Hello, end zone! Touchdown, Colonials! A 29-yard pass. David James to Chris Pascal.
A 29-yard touchdown, 13-0, with 8:15 left in the first quarter, and they never looked back. They outgained Westfield State 588-377. Mass Maritime 37, Fitchburg State 0. I mean, another shutout in the MASCAC there, as Matt Long had 245 total yards, 4 total touchdowns in the game, and Bridgewater State 56, Mass Dartmouth 20. Probably the upset of the conference this day that we're talking about is Stefano D'Amelia at 398 yards total, 5 passing, 3 rushing touchdowns. So he accounted for 8 touchdowns. Wow. Incredible. And that is the MASCAC for you. Let's talk about the new MAC. I attended the game between Springfield and Merchant Marine, and little did I know that the triple option matchup would take as long as it did because they wouldn't stop scoring, for goodness sake, in those first 3 quarters of play. But we're looking at Tim Callahan's long touchdown to start the second quarter. This was key because it made it an 11-point game again, and they never could tie this game. They got within 8 late, but Merchant Marine could never get on top. Springfield wins it 45-34. Christian Abbott was 18 for 31 passing for 374 passing yards. Yeah.
31 attempts?
Yeah.
This is a triple option troop group?
Not so much, my friend.
31?
2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but Callahan had 3 touchdowns on the ground, including the one that you saw. Let's look at WPI. Their first touchdown with 11:47 left in the first quarter was a 22-yard touchdown from Julian Nyland to Clark Ewan. We always talk about Field and McAllen on the ground there, but Julian Nyland's got an arm, and there it is as he found Ewan in a very tough position in the end zone, gets it for the touchdown. 52-24. WPI remains undefeated at 6-0. They led 42-10 at the half and kind of just took their foot off the accelerator in that game. Coast Guard 33, Maine Maritime 8, as Ryan Jones, not drinking from the mug, but definitely drinking something good down there, as he throws for 26 for 34, 353 passing yards, and 3 touchdowns, just 1 interception for him. They outgained Maine Maritime 463 to 283. And that leaves us with the NESCAC, which had maybe some of the most exciting and most important action of the weekend. First, we're going to talk about Wesleyan and Middlebury. Middlebury wins the game 45-21, but the lights out moment was before halftime with 3:43 left. Maxwell Rye receives an 80-yard touchdown pass from Will Jernigan as the defender just peeled off of Maxwell Rye, and it was nothing but green between him and the end zone for that 80-yard touchdown to make it 24-7 before halftime. There's no way they were going to recover from that one, Wesleyan, and Middlebury's in great control now at 6-0 in the NESCAC. But how about the heartwarming game? Go ahead. You're calling that one too? We'll talk about it later.
Yep. Middlebury are your 2019 NESCAC champs. You heard it here first.
Let's talk about the very surprising result in the Amherst game. Amherst had a lead late. A touchdown and 2-point conversion, which was a close call, made it 28-28 in this game. Amherst had the ball back, but then, you're watching it, the punt block.
And it's blocked! The Continentals block it! The Continentals block the punt!
And then that was followed by this play.
It's on its way, it's got distance, and he got it!
They win this game on a 40-yard walk-off field goal by Sam Maureen, 31-28. Hamilton moves to 3-3. This is a great season for them when you think about it. Hamilton has been a no-show in the NESCAC for a little while, and now they're beating teams like Amherst, in the NESCAC.
Yeah, and I think I heard either Keith or Pat on Around the Nation say this is the first time Continentals have beaten Amherst since like '92. I mean, that was my freshman year of college. That's a long time ago.
Let's not go there. Trinity, let me just keep going. Trinity 43, Colby 7 as Trinity moves to 4-2. Colby 0-6. They outgained Trinity. Trinity outgained Colby, he said, 480 to 268. Williams 35, Bates 7. Bobby M with 270 total yards and 3 passing touchdowns. The defense, though, 2 interceptions for Williams. And Tufts 49, Bowden 0. OJ Armstrong 6 receptions, 142 yards, 3 touchdowns in that game. Guess what, JB? That is crunch time for week 7. I'm trying to find a jingle to begin our next segment here because you have taken my advice and named it JB's Stat Chat. This is kind of one of those like NBA on TNT type things where they've got the stat of the night or something like that, and all that, or EJ Stat of the night. We've got to get JB Stat Chat or something like that. We'll make it. We'll make it happen.
It'd be helpful if one of us was like a musician or something who knew how to write songs. I don't know. Yep.
Wait, you're a musician?
Supposedly.
By the way, who's that beautiful woman that's to your left, my right on that video?
Yeah, that's my wife Jen. We were singing some duets at the new place in town, so it was a fun Saturday night. Yeah, band was getting out there again, and we'll be back at it in a couple weeks.
Did they W in like last time or no?
I don't think so.
Let's talk about the stat chat. Notable offensive days. I think you're missing one here, to be honest with you. The 8 touchdowns.
Amelia.
Yeah,
Amelia should be the first one on that list.
Hold on, I'm writing it in.
Yeah. And
Gallaudet,
also,
though, and Westcott both scoring
not morning. That was another thing I had to fix. Yeah.
Sorry, it's okay. Gallaudet and Westcott with 62 points. Endicott with 61. And Middlebury's big win. There it is again. Basically wins the NESCAC. You're apparently predicting again. And Randall from Gallaudet, Golick from Misericordia, Wilson from Lebanon Valley, and Griffin from Alfred rack up over 200 rush yards apiece. This is where running backs hit their groove a little bit, I think, in the season. Yep. We see this, I think, every year where the 200 number starts getting eclipsed around and past the mid-season point. These standouts start getting more carries because they've stepped up enough for their coaches to believe in them. So they'll get more carries. They won't get as much rotation out. And you start riding the big boys at this point the way that they are. So I'm not going to be shocked to see maybe that a recurring theme over the next couple of weeks.
I think it's that, and it's also, I think, your week 7, the offensive lines have had, they've played as a group enough now where they're able to open the holes. That they're working well cohesively as a unit. So yeah, I mean, there weren't a ton of these games, but there was, like 5 or so guys this weekend who had over 200 rushing yards. Definitely stood out.
Then we have Tenacious D's. I'll let you take everybody through this one.
Well, yeah, we saw a lot of shutouts, including, we mentioned before, Ithaca, we saw Mass Maritime, Del Val, a lot of just really stalwart defensive performances. Even Nichols, they scored on a safety and on a pick 6 within less than 90 seconds apart in their game. So a lot of strong defensive performances. We thought we might have some more competitive games. Not so much. a lot of one-sided defensive affairs, and that's another thing that you see around week 7 is that the defensive units have gelled. They're playing well and shutting down opposition pretty strongly there.
Special teamers, Hamilton's place kicker Sam Marine with that game-winning 40-yard field goal. But let's not take away the punt block that led to that whole situation in the first place. And the cop place kicker Nick DiCarano with the 47-yard field goal. Coast Guard place kicker Patrick Crowley, 44-yard field goal, 84-yard kickoff return by Cortland's Cole Burgess, and then the punt block that followed it. Returned by Dylan Studer for the touchdown. Tamir Barksdale, 64-yard punt return for touchdown. Joe Ciampola with the punt block return for a touchdown for TCNJ. That was the only scoring that TCNJ had. That's all they needed. 7-3 win, as you saw in crunch time. So, some standouts across the 3 facets of the game, indeed. Where do we go from here? And so I think we need to go through the schedules and the standings and everything else at this point to understand what's next. And first things first, so I want to make sure I can see you as we do this as well. Hey, there you are, JB on my screen. Actually, let me put that back. So, no, I'm just kidding. Union and Ithaca, we're going to start in the Liberty League, actually, this go-around, because this seems to be the clash coming up. And if this continues, you and I are talking about maybe heading out to Ithaca for the Union Ithaca Showdown in week 9 on November 2nd, my mother's birthday, actually. At least I will get there for if Union and Ithaca remain undefeated to that point. And I think that would take them to both 8-0 at that point if it happens. RPI still has some say here. Buffalo State, an outsider's chance at 1-5, 1-1. Congratulations on getting their first win of the season, by the way, against Rochester. Yeah. But obviously, Rochester beating them in a close game doesn't give me much confidence about Buffalo State. It is pretty much Union, Ithaca, and RPI with some say in what's going to happen. And this weekend, Union Buffalo State, Union could do a favor to everybody by making sure Buffalo State gets knocked off here. This is the first showdown between those two teams. I believe in my entire existence around Union football back to 1995, Okay, so that it's been a while that I can remember them playing each other.
They might have played in the early I remember Hobart played against Buff State in '93, so it's possible there could have been some overlap back then, but it's been a long time, yeah, if ever.
So this would be one of their longest road trips. That's a 6+ hour road trip, I believe, for them from Schenectady to Buffalo State. RPI at St. Lawrence. Never trust that turf in St. Lawrence this time of the year, that's for sure, as it's getting a little bit colder up there in the North Country. And Ithaca at Rochester, probably not much to worry about in that game for Ithaca fans. We'll see what happens. So let's go to the Empire 8. Cortland 6-0.
Speaking of Ithaca fans, we got a question from the Barstool of Ithaca. How far can they go in the playoffs? Apparently, they've already won the Liberty League, and so they're going to the playoffs, Frank. So maybe you should cancel your plans to go up to the Union game.
Well, we'll make sure that we address this in the what-if scenario instead of the definitive scenario, because Cortica may have something to say about this as well. And Britt Segale does talk to us a little bit about what to expect there, but though he doesn't talk much about it for obvious reasons. How far can they go? Look, the defense is playing lights out. You've got Joe Germinario doing well. The one thing I'm going to say is that the St. John Fisher game, which was almost a calamity for them in that second half, probably came at the right time. And we've seen Germinario last year stutter in certain games and seemed to right the ship, but then didn't fully. And maybe he was a little worn down at the end of the season, maybe a little battered and injured as well toward the end of the season. I don't know for sure, but my point here is that I think Joe, as he's matured as a quarterback and a leader of a team, has a better idea of how to avoid that situation from happening again. I'm sure after that game, he was as disappointed in himself as anybody was. And so I don't expect to see that again unless there's a really tight, tough game. Union could be one of those games where it's going to be tight and tough. Cortland's going to be a tight and tough game, most likely. RPI, we'll see what happens. But then the first round of the playoffs, if they can go 10-0, they're going to probably get a walkover game, essentially. It's the second round again that becomes the important question. And last year, I took a lot of flack for predicting a second-round exit by Brockport if they continued playing the way they were. And they exited in the second round, and we know what happened after that. The second round is where things get really close in terms of the teams. Even the top-seeded teams in the East, the separation between them and the middle-seeded teams in the East are not as big as you would think. They're pretty close there by that point. So
the big
can they
question
go 2 rounds? I think 3 rounds they probably could go if they really got past an opponent in the second round.
I think what it'll boil down to, Frank, is going to be whether or not an East team is deemed by the committee good enough to warrant a number 1 seed. Right now, the top 4 are basically all Midwestern schools, some of the usual suspects, Mount Union, Whitewater, St. John's, and is that Mary Hardin Baylor? I think I've heard of them. Yeah, the defending national champions. I think if an Ithaca team can go 10-0 with a win over what will probably be a top, potentially 15 ranked Cortland team, that could be good enough for the East to get its own pod, you could say. I'm sure the Johnnies or the Warhawk fans will be furious if that happens, but it wouldn't be unprecedented for a 10-0 East Region team that had big wins over regionally ranked opponents to get that spot. And if Ithaca ends up being the top ranked team in their bracket, a trip to even the semifinals could be in the offering possibly. So we'll see.
Well, let me tell you something. If Brockport wins the conference, if Brockport wins the Empire 8 and Ithaca's in the playoffs, you know darn well that in the second round at a minimum, they will be facing each other in the bracket. There's no avoiding it, okay? They're going to do it. They would love to do it in the first round probably to make it happen right there, but if the teams are like this, in separation, they could do it. But if they're like this, you can't justify it in the first round. But in the second round at a minimum, it'll be Brockport-Ithaca if Brockport makes it through and wins the Empire 8. Now, if Cortland wins and Ithaca's in the playoffs, they're going to try to avoid that rematch for a couple rounds because Cortica would be week 11, and seeing that quick of a turnaround on a rematch would not be what the NCAA would deem a good idea. So we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of what ifs to go on here, and so let's get closer to the end of the season before we really go to that level of things. Let's now go to the Empire 8. Cortland 6-0, 3-0. Brockport 5-1, 2-0. It's setting up because now Alfred has dropped a game, and then everybody else is 2 losses, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 below them, and it's Utica, Brockport. Brockport can't take this game for granted because Utica played with them last season for sure in Utica. Hartwick at Alfred and Cortland at St. John Fisher. Instead of talking too much about this game coming up, we'll say go to our interview with Brett Segala. That's coming up later in the week because we talk a lot about this St. John Fisher team and the fact that it's a Jekyll and Hyde team this season. We'll see which one comes out against Cortland. But that is the Empire 8. Next up, the NJAC. And we kind of whispered about this a little bit, about those one-loss teams that are trailing Salisbury. Wesley's already been beaten by Salisbury. Montclair State plays Wesley this weekend. TCNJ, they're doing great defensively. It's the offense that needs to show up here for that team. And when you look at what their schedule looks like this coming week, you have TCNJ against Christopher Newport. They're going to have to step it up a little bit there because that CNU team's been all over the map. Montclair State, as we said, against Wesley at Wesley this year. And Salisbury, Kane, Rowan, William Patterson. I don't see any surprises there. Montclair at Wesley, interesting game. It's going to line up as an important game here because if Montclair can win it, then they still face Salisbury. If Wesley wins it, actually, do I have that right? Let's see. No, Montclair's already played Salisbury, so they've both taken a loss.
Lives. They're fighting for their Pool C lives because, especially with 2 undefeated teams in the Liberty League, 2 undefeated. Well, I guess if Brockport technically has the loss against Hobart, but if they finish the season as the runner-up, well, I guess with 2 losses, chances aren't that great. But Wesley's going to need some kind of miracle almost to make the NCAA playoffs with how tough the Pool C situation is. So this is a must-win game for them. No matter how they have to run the table from here on out to even have a chance, and that still may not even be good enough to make it.
We'll see where it goes from there. But Salisbury definitely in the driver's seat right now, as you said. Would you like to make your prediction one more time for everybody?
Your 2019 NJAC champions, Salisbury University Seagulls.
The Seagulls. So we'll see where it goes there. I always avoid making bold predictions like that because certain things just don't age well, as Justin McEwen has taught me over time from Endicott.
Yes.
Let's look at the MAC. You'll see right now that Delaware Valley is at 5-0, Misericordia at 4-0. Again, they do not play each other this season. We got to look at that tiebreaker sooner or later, and we will. 6-1 Del Val, Misericordia 4-1 overall. Wilkes at 5-1, 3-1. Stevenson at 3-1, Lebanon Valley at 3-1. Still sitting there waiting for somebody to make a mistake up top, but the odds of both Delaware Valley and Misericordia dropping one right now are getting very low as we get deeper into this season, heading into week 8 at this point. So let's look at the schedule. Kings at Stevenson doesn't affect things there much. FDU Florham at Lycoming. Lebanon Valley at Delaware Valley. So here's a chance for Delaware Valley to take one of those one-loss teams out. Lebanon Valley's been playing some headstrong football, but inconsistently so at times. Widener at Albright and Wilkes at Misericordia. There's a battle of one-loss teams, or another battle of one-loss team versus undefeated, just like the Del Val situation. Can Del Val and Misericordia both make it out of these games against one-loss conference teams to keep undefeated? That's the question at 1 o'clock across the board for the MAC that we'll be looking for. Is Misericordia really for real? If that running game keeps up here, James, I think suddenly it's a whole new world for them, and suddenly I've got more confidence in them.
Yeah, I mean, we used to kind of joke around. It was like the Brady Williams, the magician type deal, winning games on the last play. But if Golick or whatever the running back's name is, keeps cranking out 200-yard games, the Cougars are going to be a tough out. So I do think Wilkes has a good opportunity to pick themselves back up and potentially help Del Val with a win, but we'll see. Misericordia just keeps finding a way to win games, whether it's Williams throwing or now apparently Golick's running. They look like a good team.
ECFC. The best thing in some ways that could happen for the ECFC is Gallaudet to win the conference. They only have 3 losses ultimately because everybody else is at 4, 5, or 6 losses. Dean, again, is not eligible for the Pool A bid. We have confirmed it with the manual, so this is definite now. Dean will not be in the playoffs this year. So Gallaudet basically has a 1-game lead on everybody who's eligible. But if Dean beats Gallaudet eventually, then suddenly they brought everybody back down to earth. Dean could be the champion of the ECFC, and we'll have a second-place team representing the ECFC in the playoffs, which is not exactly what I would call a best-case scenario for any conference with only 6 teams. SUNY Maritime, maybe back here. Anna Maria did not look good against Dean. Give Dean credit. After getting kind of beaten down emotionally and physically in the season, they put it to Anna Maria in that game on Saturday. So what's next? Dean at Gallaudet. There it is. Circle it, star it, and everything else. And SUNY Maritime at Anna Maria. These are huge games for this conference. While the rest of the country may not give two you-know-whats at this point about it, these games matter for these teams. The game between SUNY Maritime and Anna Maria is now at 2 p.m. instead of 1 p.m. That was the original scheduled time. It was moved to 2 p.m. just in case you planned on attending it. CCC. Not yes, but CCC. It's Endicott at 5-1, Western New England at 5-1, though that's a little suspect because they played Stetson, as we keep reminding people, but both teams at 3-0 in conference, and that showdown is looming very large here. I don't think Nichols is going to have much say in this situation, ultimately, unless somebody really trips up. But Endicott has to be careful of Husson, who is fresh off of what really is a surprising loss against the University of New England. West New England against Curry doesn't really give me much excitement. Salve Regina at Becker, no. Nichols at University of New England. We'll see if UNE can carry momentum for 2 games. But Endicott at Husson, that could be a real trap game for Endicott. They have to be careful there. This is not a Becker-type scenario, guys. This is an honest... You don't know which Husson's showing up this year. So we'll see if it ages well. Let's see. We've done the CCC. We've done the ECFC. So that will put us to... Oh, the NUMAC. Wait a minute. I think we need to talk about the NUMAC a little bit here. Springfield is not dead. And I know that surprises some people, but they are very much alive with 3 losses right now at 3-1. They're going to need to get some help from Merchant Marine. Obviously, playing WPI this week in Worcester. If Merchant Marine's able to beat WPI, then suddenly we have the merry-go-round 1-loss scenario, and anything can start to happen there. MIT, though, sitting there with 1 loss as well at 2-1. So... Merchant Marine and Springfield have games in hand against WPI and MIT, depending on what happens this weekend, obviously. So, before we go to, too much information here, we're going to talk about the Catholic Springfield game with our guests that we'll have in the interviews coming up here. Merchant Marine and WPI we talked about. MIT at Coast Guard is a big game as well. MIT is going to be fighting for their life in the conference. Coast Guard beats them, then that takes away a little bit of the carnage at top that could be happening. Maine Maritime at Norwich. Norwich needs to win, obviously. We'll see where they go with that. But Springfield. Catholic is a team that can show up. We've seen it this season. They have not converted into the win column, but we'll see where it goes. But it was a very positive win and performance by Springfield against Merchant Marine this weekend. First, we talked about Tim Callahan, who had 3 touchdowns on the ground for Springfield. We saw the clip earlier of him running down the field right past me. Talked to him about this season, especially the flow of the season, and whether or not Springfield is back in his mind. 45-34 victory for Springfield, and Tim Callahan, 3 touchdowns today. Let's read this, 154 yards it says here. I was here for a couple of them. You scored early and often before I even got here today. What was your game flow here overall? It seemed like a lot of scoring early on, and things tailed off toward the end, but did you guys anticipate a shootout like this in this game?
Yeah, we just trusted the process, trusted our guys, and we always talk about hammering away at them and just doing everything we can, hammering away, and we were able to pop a couple. Just the offensive line, I can't say enough about them. Just working every day and doing everything they can. So
does that include Nick Bainter?
Definitely Nick Bainter, yes. He's quite the character, and he's great kid, and it's a great day.
We'll leave it at that. He's quite the character. But, this team has had some adversity, ups and downs. We talked with Chad and Nick a couple weeks ago when we were being serious for a minute about that. But how does a win like this feel?
It just felt like a long time coming, especially for the offense side of the ball. I really think that we just came together and, like I said, just hammering away. And it was good to see some results, and it was just good to see us come out and really just guide the way we did and do what we did.
A lot of people were saying Springfield was dead in the playoff hunt in the new MAC. What do you say to them right now?
I say, hey, we're coming, and we're going to keep going. We're going to finish the season as hard as we can. We're going to do everything we can, and we're going to get as many wins as we can.
Tim Callahan Jr., right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a nightmare for the rest of the new MAC right now. But you get shout-outs here, so any family, friends, teammates that might be watching.
Shout out to my dad and my sister who are here right now. Always supporting me, and let's just keep this thing going.
Amen. 45-34. Congratulations.
Thanks to Tim for that. Then we had A.J. Smith, who had 13 tackles, led the team. I think the next highest tackle number was 6 for Springfield. And Smith had what he thought was an interception, but unfortunately was taken back from him. Springfield did intercept the ball in the next play after the referees talked about the first one and waved it off. But A.J. Smith, a real team leader on defense right now for Springfield, and that defense needs to show up and not give up as many points as they did on Saturday, because obviously 34 points, you need to be a little careful about that. You can't depend on Springfield to score 45 every week. But here's A.J. Smith.
A.J. Smith, I believe 13 tackles on the afternoon is what they have you down for, and it's about 50-50 split between solo and assisted. So congratulations today on that. 45-34 victory. A lot of people will look at the score and say, oh, what defense? But you guys had to step up, especially toward the end of the game when it became an 8-point game. What were you telling the guys on the sideline when things got a little bit closer toward the end of this?
Just rally up and just focus on the little things, and just together and just coming together. That's about it.
I heard a lot of that on the sideline, a lot of together when I was kind of in the mix of in things over there. When things were kind of coming apart, I heard that especially. Explain to folks what that means to the Springfield program.
Togetherness is just one of our traditions, is brotherhood all together. That's one of our morals and values of the team. Just all of us together, brotherhood, strongest one.
So you come out of this game, and I was talking to Tim Callahan about just the flow of the season. It looked like it was kind of a disastrous season starting out to some people, and now you guys are kind of right there. WPI obviously is sitting atop of things, but you're still kind of knocking on the door here in the new MAC. Catholic next. What do people have to look forward to from Springfield? Has Springfield turned the corner here for the season?
It's a tough question, because I feel like we definitely have been moving in the right direction from the start of the season, but just one game at a time. We're not really focused on the end result. Just want to know each and every day. So next week, going against Catholic, just want to know.
They always used to say 0-0 with one to go, the next game up. So Catholic coming up, as you said. But before Catholic, you do get to give shout-outs to any family, friends, teammates that might be watching.
Yeah, I want to give a shout-out to my family that came out today, and just all my boys back home just watching the live stream.
Sounds good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And the man that's kept it all together, let's hear from him, Mike Cerasuolo, the head coach of Springfield. How has he done it, essentially, is the question a lot of people have, because this team was dead in the water in a lot of people's minds. Not so much right now.
Coach Mike Cerasuolo, 45-34 victory over Merchant Marine Academy. That's a good team right here.
Very good.
No matter how much Toop tries to play things down at the beginning of the season, he's got a good team both run and pass-wise offensively, and the defense can step up. But your team came out hot early. Did you kind of plan on that? How did you look at this game and how to beat this team when you came into it?
It was really important for us to start fast, and we always talk about that, and we haven't really done it yet offensively this year. And we were kind of holding right around that 2-score, 3-score type thing. And today, obviously, they were able to get some things going. And offensively, I thought we put some drives together. We put 2 halves together. So it was really good to see the execution step up. And and then at critical times as well. And then right before the half, that was a big score. So we kept answering. They came back and like you said, Coach Toop does a great job, and Coach Kickle and Coach Kroll, a couple Springfield grads. So those kids play hard. They're coached well, and it's always a great atmosphere coming down here and playing them. So we appreciate the opportunity.
You could have lost your team in terms of the way the season started off in some ways. You really could have lost their focus and their attitude. How have you kept it together to the point where you guys really, aside from WPI right now, you're still knocking on the door here for the NUMAC. How did you keep it together with that?
Yeah, I know every coach says it, but we got great kids, and we got tremendous leadership at all 4 levels, as far as the older kids, the younger kids, and it means a lot to the kids. And we always tell them that the scoreboard never defines who you are, but they like to win. So and they like to compete, and they work really hard on and off the field. So like I said, I know everybody says it, but we got good kids. We're happy to have them on our side.
Catholics up next. Coach Gutt down there has had some close calls throughout this season, but they're still trying to find a signature win this season, and why not Springfield? I'm sure he's going to say to his team. How do you keep your teams focused? This is probably the perennial question that coaches get asked. How do you keep your teams focused in a game that on paper you should win, but they want something next week badly, probably to beat you? How do you keep it?
Well, I think, like we tell our kids every week, is we should win every game. That's our mindset. So we want to just keep them focused on what they can control, and that's their attitude and their effort through the course of the week and preparing, and it's never about the other team. It's always about us and how we're going to execute and how we're going to practice, and if we're going to do our part to make sure that each guy does their job.
Final question. Nick Bainter and Chad Shade are threatening to come down to Florida to photobomb or video bomb our postseason show when it happens eventually. Do you have any words of wisdom on what we should or shouldn't do if they do come down?
Good luck.
45-34 victory today, Coach.
Thank you.
Springfield, what do you think? Is this team for real, or is the jury out for you?
No, I think they definitely have turned the corner, and maybe it's probably an outside chance that someone trips up WPI down the stretch. The Engineers look really solid. They've been the #1 rated team in New England pretty much since week 2 or 3, and I have a feeling that they're on a path to go 10-0. But Springfield could still end up 7-3, probably a New England Bowl berth of some kind, and finish the season with 8 wins. So heck of a job by Coach Cerasuolo and the staff there at the Pride. They, like you said, they're kind of back to life, and they're going to give it a good run down the stretch, because anything's possible. And all it takes is one trip up by WPI, and all of a sudden all bets are off.
We have a big head-to-head coming up in the MASCAC coming up here. WestCon, Framingham State. Okay, we're going to talk about that game with our guest, Framingham State, coming up later in the week, as we said, but that matchup is coming up in Framingham State. You look at certain numbers, and you look at points for and points against in conference play this season for these two teams. WestCon points for 184 in those 4 games, just 4 games with 184, but 110 points against. Framingham State, 177 points in 4 games. So again, no softballs there in terms of the numbers that they've been putting up. And 61 points against. So on paper, Framingham State seems to be the team to beat. But the problem here is that they did drop 2 games this season. Now, in retrospect, those 2 games might have been actually better opponents than we thought they were. And so this really does line up to be, I think, Framingham State as the favorite, despite the 2 losses. This is an unusual scenario to say that. But being the home team and knowing one of those losses was a very good Brockport team, and right off the first game of the season to a certain degree, and look at their recent play, Framingham State's for real right now.
Framingham State's 2 losses are to teams that are very possible conference champion / playoff participants. So in the rear view, and as we were reminded in our interview, Framingham didn't allow a offensive touchdown to Brockport in that game. The two scores that they had were on kind of crazy, back-to-back pick sixes. So that game could have easily gone the Rams' way as well. And their defense really seems to be keyed in. Adam Wojcinski, who struggled with some interceptions, I think, in week 1 and 2, is starting to turn the corner. And Jacob Meyer, the big tight end, starting to get some more looks, get some more opportunities. And so, yeah, I agree. At home, Framingham is probably the favorite, and should be a great game.
Let's also point out that Mass Maritime plays Plymouth State, and that's kind of to stay alive for Mass Maritime more than anything else. If somebody up top slips up, the winner of the Westcon Framingham State game may lose still this season. It's possible. So Mass Maritime needs to sit there and wait to see what happens. Bridgewater State, I believe, is off this weekend. So there is the MASCAC, and I will let you say it again. Here comes the NESCAC at this point. And that conference looks like it belongs to Middlebury because their last 3 games are against Bowdoin, Hamilton, and Tufts. But I will say this. If Hamilton plays the way they played against Amherst this past week, there's a chance. There's a chance.
That is probably the one chance with for teams like Williams that are hoping for an opportunity to get a share of the crown.
But they got to lose twice, JB. They got to lose twice because Wesleyan and Williams are already beaten by them underneath them. So it would have to be Hamilton and one other. Hamilton and Tufts probably under that circumstance. And even then, I'm not even sure how the tiebreakers would work if everybody ended up at 2 losses ultimately. But we'll see where it goes. Yeah. Middlebury is the favorite.
Middlebury is your champ. And, they're the favorite the rest of the way these last 3 weeks.
Williams at Trinity could be a good game on the undercard, I guess, at this point. Hamilton at Tufts, there's kind of the heir apparent game because they both have to face Middlebury coming up. And Wesleyan and Amherst could be an interesting game as well. But, hey, it's Middlebury at Bowdoin coming up Saturday. Probably not a game that many people will get excited by, but that's where it is. JB, as always, I let you take us out with your final thoughts on Week 7 as we line up for Week 8.
Yeah, I think what we saw in Week 7 was what we talked about last week. It was definitely a semifinal / separation type of weekend. Now we're starting to see games like Framingham and Westcon shaping up, which are sort of de facto conference title games. There's going to be about 4 or 5 of them, I think, in Week 9. The way the schedule is shaping up. So we're getting down to the brass tacks here. It's kind of getting obvious who are the true contenders for each of these conferences to make it into the playoffs. We'll have hopefully Jim Casanero on the show in a couple weeks to talk about how those brackets come together. I think we're also going to be doing a little ECAC Bowl reveal show for the second year in a row, which will be fun. And so even though some teams that this weekend and the following weekend may drop out of the NCAA playoffs, there's still going to be some postseason games to talk about ways to wrap up seasons and careers for a lot of these players. So still a lot of football left to go, and it should be fun to ride the rest of the way.
We're just over the hour mark for this show, so let's basically say goodbye for now. But we have player interviews coming up in the next day or so after this is dropped, and then on Friday our Lightning Live predictions coming up. But we hope you enjoyed JV's Stat Chat on this episode and Crunch Time and all of our review of where the races are and aren't at this point in the 9 conferences of the East region. We'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us.